Hi, I'm Courtney. This is something positive for positive people. And I just found $20 in my phone case right before this podcast.
Hey, hey.
Today I am here with Melissa from Sex Positive Families. Are we going to talk about the podcast or is it the company?
The podcast and the company. I
All
think it.
right.
I feel like it's all together. It's all part of the cause.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk more about that after we get through your introduction. So, Melissa is 37 years old.
I think so. I think
You,
so.
we think you're 37. You work as a social worker slash
Sex
sex
educator.
educator.
Yeah.
You are a heterosexual woman, she, her pronoun. You are in a monogamous relationship with your husband,
So I
boyfriend.
am not. Yeah. So I am in a partnership. We are not married. We have been married before,
Uh huh.
and we're not. Interested in jumping into that step anytime soon. We enjoy raising our families together, so we have a blended family situation, and yeah, and I'll also say that I actually identify as gender queer,
Okay.
so I am open to any of the pronouns, and that's something that I recently came to understand about myself. So,
Well, shit, I completely messed that up. All right.
well, no, no, this is great. This is great dialogue because this is where we're at. I think in our society again as part of the sex positive conversation. Understanding the gender spectrum. And it's a journey.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And since doing this podcast, I find myself talking to more people who are in tune with their sexuality, who identify
Yes.
as things that I've never heard of. Like one of the first guests I had, she goes, "I'm pansexual." I was like, what?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And then she mentioned polyamory, and I was like, "Oh, I've heard of it, but never been able to really have a conversation about it." To me, it just sounded like I have sex with multiple people, but it's
Mm.
so much deeper than
It's so
that.
deep, and
Yeah.
it's very much about commitment,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh
it's
yeah.
a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Beautiful thing.
All right, and we got to your career field, and we talked about your sexuality. So, quick story before we get started. Normally, the guests that I have on are people who have some sort of STD or living with some sexual. Yeah, there's no other way to put it. I tried to rephrase it. People who are living with STDs. So I normally reach out to or have people reach out to me and have them on the podcast to talk about their experience with their condition. This is one of the more recent cases of me. I follow Melissa on Instagram, Sex Positive Families, and I saw that she was posting a lot of sex positive things and just really being more educational. And I feel like that's something that has come up a lot on the podcast is a lack of sex education for children. Like growing up, I talked about my lack of sex education, and it's come up with a lot of the guests that we've had on as well. Just being misinformed and being taught one way, and it's really outdated for the society that we live in. Don't have sex, be abstinent. That is not what message we should be sending to our youth and our families, and even in like conversations with close friends. Like we can't say
Right.
don't have
It
sex.
doesn't work. It
It
doesn't work.
does not work, and it is proven. You have me to attest to that. And in reaching out about this, we came to find out that Melissa actually has HSV2, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's goes to show like you just don't know. I mean, first off, unless you ask,
Right.
but in just this is just a really good example of how common it is. And this is someone who is a sex educator, who's a social worker. We're talking about a 37, we think, year old African American female with a family. Like this is more of these
It's
are the
real
kinds of
life.
people that we want to hear
We're
it
talking
from.
real life.
Yes,
We're talking
it's
human beings, and it's part of a human experience.
absolutely. So before we talk about what I wanted to talk about, let's talk about what needs to be talked about first for the podcast, and that's just your experience with HSV2. First off, how long have you been HSV2 positive?
Yeah, so it has been, I want to say, about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a brand new diagnosis. And do you just want me to kind of give
Oh
you
yeah, we
the
could
nitty
just
gritty, the
yeah. So
highlights? Okay.
in short, it'd be like,
Yeah.
what was going on with you around that time? Do you know where you got it from? And
Yeah.
like, what were
So,
your symptoms?
yeah, absolutely. So, at the time was earlier in my career as a social worker, and I was working in the field of HIV and STIs, and so I was serving folks that were HIV positive, and often helping to provide support and linkage to services and discussions around disclosure of their status and normalizing and destigmatizing, right? So when I found myself with flu-like symptoms and really sick, and I didn't know I didn't tie that directly for myself because I thought that I was in a monogamous relationship at that time. And I went to the doctor, and I learned that I had genital herpes. And that was a real shock and blow to me. I did, in spite of my career and my education up to that point, I can own that I had my own um, messages, internally about what a diagnosis like that would mean to me and for me. And that definitely shined and played out when when it when I became positive. I was concerned, of course, about being, not being as lovable or as kind of being, tainted at that point. Realize again these feelings came up, and of course dealing with the fact that my partner was the one that had transmitted it to me. I don't know. It never became clear whether he was aware of his diagnosis. We did not remain in the relationship after that, and I then became single, and so then I had to again confront with myself a sense of my worth and my value as I looked to try to enter into a new connection with
Hmm.
someone, because as humans, often we desire connection. We want to be affirmed and validated and loved and all of these things. So I was really struggling with feeling like I was lovable at that point, and who will want to have sex with me, and how will I, and again all of this while I am in the work and in the field.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, of course, again 10 years out now, and certainly doing the level of work that I'm doing now, it's a testament again to a lot of the messaging that we get and we internalize, and that our society gives us. So many jokes get thrown around about herpes, and ways in which it is shamed.
Hmm.
And so even with certain levels of education that you might have and awareness that you might have, until something happens to you is when you may really learn more about uh, how you really feel and what you would do in the situation. So I
At
began dating. What's that?
at this point in time, um, now I don't know if you're the kind of person who brings work home, but when you met this person, like, did you bring the sex education, Melissa, with you into that, or was it like, I'm leaving all that shit at work. Like this is me dating. I'm just dating. And what I'm essentially asking is, did you have the talk?
Yeah, okay, great question. So I went initially onto, I don't even remember the name of it now, but one of the dating websites that are for folks with HSV2.
Hmm.
And because again, I thought, like, I immediately went into mode of, I contracted this because someone did not, I
Oh,
wasn't
I'm
given.
sorry. I mean, did you have this conversation with him
Yeah,
beforehand? Okay.
what I'm getting to is that I was not given a choice
Right.
and I did not want to put someone else in that position where they were not given a choice. So
Hmm.
disclosure was something that I knew right away that moving on in my life, I was going to have to address. I was not going to transmit HSV2 without someone either knowing or consenting or being aware of the risks that were involved.
Hmm.
So yes, when I went and connected with a new person, that was part of those early conversations, but it was very hard.
Yeah.
It was very hard. It was very, I was very afraid. I was afraid of rejection
Right.
because I felt like I'd really connected with this person, and I felt like I had a lot to lose, and that rightfully, I felt, yeah, yeah, rightfully so. Someone could not want to partner with me. And so, yeah, thankfully, I guess, this person was receiving and open to it. I will say, though, it was not ultimately a healthy relationship. And the reason why I want to just point that out is that I know in retrospect that because my sense of self worth was not high, and a lot of that was impacted by my diagnosis and by shame that I carried about that, I definitely jumped into a relationship that it was not part of my pattern of
Mm-hmm.
relationships up to that point. But I felt damaged. I
Yeah.
felt like damaged goods. And I did not take the time out to really process that and heal from that.
Yeah.
So definitely that is something that, I really would love, and through the work that I know you're doing and that I'm doing, we want people to shake the shame, and we want the taboos to be trashed so that people's sense of self-worth is not compromised
Got
over
it.
these normal and human life experiences.
Yeah. And I want to go back a little bit, and you can feel free to just tell me no if you don't want to answer this. But
Okay.
did you have the talk with your previous partner? Your previous partner, did you have that? Hey, when's the last time you've been tested? Here's my status.
Right.
What's yours? Did you have that conversation with the partner you believe you
Yes.
contracted HSV2 from?
Oh, the one that I contracted from?
Yes.
Uh, yes, and that individual was resistant to going to the doctor with me. So again, big, huge red flags. I later found out that that person ended up having a child, and the timing in terms of the age of the child was at the child was conceived while we were in a relationship. It had been, I think, up to that point a 9-month relationship, so it wasn't like a short-term relationship. So
Man,
again, I thought that I was in a monogamous relationship, and I was not, and that person was not was not honest.
he did not get
And
the memo.
yeah, so yeah, that's again the part of a lot of the prevention messaging that we hear out there is that you never get comfortable. You take care of you and your health and make that primary, and have the regular and frequent conversations about sexual health
Mm-hmm.
and what your partners are doing to ensure that they are sexually healthy. And because you can't control another person, and you don't know fully.
Yeah, yeah, and I understand that, and I often tell people, before I didn't really have that talk. The extent of my talk was, do I need this condom? And that was me essentially asking, are you on birth control? Because in the back of my mind, I make the assumption that, oh, if you have an STD, you're in pain, I would be able to see it, and so you wouldn't want to have sex. So like that's kind of where my head was at before my diagnosis, and like since my diagnosis, like I would either have taken the necessary precautions all the time and had that conversation, or if the conversation wasn't had, it was just like, all right, I'm gonna be extra careful here. But
Yeah,
even then, you're not avoiding everything, and then there comes a point where the only way to, I mean, I don't even want to say avoid it, but you really have to have that open, honest communication with
yes,
your potential partner. And then, we as humans have a sense for when there's a red flag or when someone's lying to us.
yeah,
So if someone
yeah,
gets really offensive, like, oh, why would you think I have an STD? That's the worst. That's when okay, I'm gonna make a conscious choice to either still move forward, or I'm gonna remove myself from this situation because it's not like my open honesty is not being reciprocated, nor is it being respected. You would think that
right,
someone who is on the receiving end of that conversation would more so be like, oh wow, I really appreciate the fact that
yeah,
you were willing to have that conversation. As far as I'm aware, here's my status. And now that makes for more of a deeper connection, and as I often say, like better sex, because it's not like, oh,
yes,
I don't think I have to worry about that. I mean, they could be excellent liars or whatever, but you've had the conversation, and that's just right now one less worry that you have.
yeah. And another thing too is that there's always risk. It's not accurate that you're going to have safe sex. You can have safer sex,
Safer sex,
but
yep.
safe sex and risk free, there's always still a risk. Even with a condom, you can transmit STIs. And I like the term I saw you use, the skin to skin contact in
Mm-hmm.
terms of HSV too. So um, there are things that we can do to reduce our risks, but we're not completely safe from. So therefore, you're wanting to give an opportunity for you and your partners to say, "Am I willing to take this risk? Am I willing to?" And by having the communication, then you can think through that and make an informed choice about that if you know your status and your
Yeah.
partner's status.
Right. Right. And so let's talk about what you're doing. How do we begin to have that conversation? Because we could often find ourselves at there's no right time, really. I mean, if you do it too early, then it's like, oh, well, this person just wants to have sex, on to the next. And we live in a dating world where the next potential partner is literally a swipe away or a message away from, having sex. So when's the best time? Do we want to do it before we meet? Do we want to do it on the first date? Do we want to wait until we're naked and about to go to penetration? Like, at what point in time do we have this conversation with a potential partner?
Right. Great question. So it can be a range, okay? And that is going to depend on first, we always first have to look within us. What type of relationships or connections are we looking to have with another person? Are we looking to have just, casual sexual relationships? Nothing wrong with that, right? Are we looking to have committed, something that goes into more of a committed relationship, whether that's with one partner or more than one partner? What depth and level of vulnerability are we looking to have with another person? Because then that then can inform what time frame feels right and most appropriate. And so, yeah, like we talked about earlier, there are dating websites that you can access. And so people are putting it on Front Street, right up front. You know that these are diagnoses that that are living with them, right? And so therefore, right off. And some
I
people feel a little
love I
good
love
about
that
that.
you said the diagnosis is living with them. I saw
Yeah,
that like once posted somewhere, and I remember
yeah,
like, oh, I like that, and then just forgot about it. But we find ourselves positioning it like I am living with dot dot dot. When I
right,
mean that shit's living with us. Like we pay rent.
right.
We
We want to
we
we want to keep our power
yeah,
within that. Yeah.
we pay the mortgage. They're
Yes.
subleasing.
Absolutely. So sometimes putting it out front that can feel really comfortable and really uh, right for someone. And then sometimes it's you want to get to know someone because you don't know. This could just be a friend. This doesn't always mean that you're going to have that connection that goes towards intimacy.
Yeah.
So I think it's completely appropriate to decide that you are going to get to know someone. And then when it seems as though you're moving into a place where you are having the feelings that lead to intimacy or that you're desiring intimacy, then you can look to have that discussion at that point and frame it from a place of vulnerability and say, look, I am really feeling you. I'm really digging you. I'm really digging what we have and what we are creating. I am feeling like I want to get intimate with you. I want to take those next steps. Again, whatever, however you want to frame that or say that. But first, again, starting with those I statements. This is what I feel and this is what I am desiring and this is what I'm valuing in us and in our connection. There is something that I want to make sure that you are clear about and you're aware of because I respect you.
So this is
And
this is us giving consent as well, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Uh,
consent is key,
that's
right?
been coming up so much lately, and I want to make sure that I want
Yes,
to begin to cover that as well. I mean, we
beautiful.
don't have to do it here, but I want to like start to get the listeners used to hearing words like consent and whatever else it is that's going to come up. But
Yeah,
that's been
yeah,
such a big
absolutely.
one in the media lately, just due to all of the like sexual assault and like the people in power taking advantage of women and all of that. So I want to be sure to highlight some of these things and give people power and options and let them know like here are some empowering things that you can do, or here's how you can take control.
Absolutely. We we have to in this conversation of disclosure. we have to give people, the information so that they can make an informed choice and really an informed consent. They know whether what they're saying yes or no to fully, without manipulation, without secrets or lies or taboo or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so then it could be again something that once you realize you're ready, you're interested in an intimate relationship. Now you brought up then literally you're naked
Yeah.
and you are there together. That is not the best and ideal time for any dialogues about the relationship, or you don't want to wait until, or even contraception, how are we protecting ourselves? You don't wait until that literal moment that you're naked, because your emotions and your hormones are in charge at that point, and your head, kind of your clearest mind, is not going to be in charge generally.
Yeah, your
So
mind's in your genitals. Like
yeah,
that's
so
where all the brain fluid
so
goes.
that I would not say is ideal, and so you would want any of that window kind of before you approach that intimacy. But then again, because respect is a huge piece, and many people do contract HSV2 um, without being informed and made aware that that was a risk that they were being um, exposed to at that time. And so what did that feel like? How can we remember that that didn't feel good
Mm-hmm.
when we had that first outbreak, or when we were diagnosed and we realized I had no idea.
Yeah,
I
and
didn't have a choice in this. So how can we offer someone else that opportunity?
well, here's
And
the thing too: is like a lot of people I'm finding who have it, like there are studies that show a lot of people with it just don't know. So it's not
exactly.
just that you're not telling someone. There's also that person who may not know or who
Yeah,
could have
you're
had it.
asymptomatic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just go through life without any outbreak. So, and it's tough to avoid exposure to it, to say the
Mm-hmm.
least. And then how does my a thing that I've always wondered is for HSV specifically, like when did type 1 become type 2? Like if cold sores are on your lips and then you get it genitally and you pass it on genitally, like it's isn't hasn't it originated from, is its origin type 1 or what? It's and
Right.
this is probably a question for medical professionals who
Yeah.
also look at history and all of that, but that's just
Right.
something that I always play with in my mind. Like, where did this start? Who started herpes? Who started HIV? Who started STDs in
Ooh,
general?
you're
Because,
going deep.
yeah, if
Yeah, I mean,
these aren't.
so you can get, if you do a blood test, if you're not having an active outbreak that they can, get a culture from, or then you can get a blood test, of course, at any point, and they're checking for antibodies and just seeing how your body is reacting, and so from that you can determine,
Yeah.
is this HSV1 or is this HSV2 or both, and those tests are not always accurate,
Uh huh.
on either again, but that is a way that you can find out.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, you bring up a great point that there are so many folks. So our reporting, our CDC data, is going to be based on what's reported cases, and that's in the United States, 3 million reported cases. That is definitely low in terms of how many people are actually living with the diagnosis, right? Because a lot of cases go unreported. There's extreme backlogs of reporting. So knowing again how common HSV1 and HSV2 are, and HSV1 with the oral, we know a lot of folks tend to get that when they're younger from casual, skin to skin contact, kisses, or contact with relatives. So yeah, there are a lot of
Yeah.
possibilities, and so the fact that there's so much stigma around this, and you have a sex negative culture because it's correlated with being a sexually transmitted infection, it definitely makes it more challenging than
Yeah.
other viruses that are
Hmm.
out there that are not connected to sex.
Right.
It makes it
Right.
harder for folks to come out of that shame and create a new story and a new narrative, and just treat it as this is just a virus. This is
Yeah.
just a virus, and at any point we will all potentially be exposed to it or contract it. So what's the big deal?
What I find interesting is that we're you can have antibodies for HSV
Hmm.
but test negative for it. So
Absolutely
like
right.
if you reach above a certain level, now the virus is active. So in my mind, it's just like the flu. When you get a flu shot, they inject you with the flu, and now you're supposed to be able to fight the flu, even though it evolves or whatever. So it's
Yeah.
like anyone who has antibodies, even if your test comes back negative, if there's a presence of antibodies, does that mean you have herpes? Like, are we just waiting? Does this just mean, oh, you just haven't had your first outbreak yet, and you could still pass on your antibodies to someone else since you're testing negative? And it's just like it opens the door for a lot more questioning, and where there's so much, like you can't tell how long you've gotten it, and it does seem to be an inevitable virus. And if
Yes.
everyone's getting chickenpox and you like we want our kids to get chicken pox early, like there's
Well,
chicken.
now, we have the vaccines for that. So now our young people are not getting chickenpox if they're
Really?
because oh yeah, because they're
Shit,
getting
that goes to show how old I
vaccinated,
am.
then chickenpox are essentially being eradicated. But what we do have is herpes zoster. Herpes zoster is shingles.
Mm-hmm.
So what we see then are shingles, and that often impacts people in later years
Yeah.
as people age and get older. If you were someone that had chicken pox, then you have herpes zoster, and therefore you are susceptible to shingles later in life, which just like any of these herpes strains and diagnoses, stress is a huge trigger for these things. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yes, our children are not getting chickenpox if they're getting their vaccinations. So
Okay, so now that which brings me to my next point. So if we've gotten chicken pox, and chicken pox is a form of herpes, is that the level, or are those antibodies what we have in our body that are showing up on a blood test? Like, I'm not expecting you to ask this question. These are
oh
just
right.
questions I
Yeah, no,
want.
these are great.
These
These are
are
great questions to ask. And
all.
again, the inevitability, like you're saying, is the key takeaway here. Is that we are so why are we then carrying so much fear, so much shame associated with something that's so very common and part of the human experience.
Yeah, and I feel like the stigma really comes from people who don't have it. That's what fuels it. What fuels it is people who don't have it, and then what brings it
Who
back
don't know that
into
they have it.
reality. There you go. Yeah, sorry. Who don't have
Right,
it or don't
right.
know that they have it, or just don't know a lot about it, and then like the people who contract it go into it with those thoughts in mind, versus like being able to go, oh shit, like I knew I was gonna get this at some point. Oh well, now I have to tell other
Yeah,
people before I have sex with them. And having that attitude versus the attitude that you get where you're carrying the thoughts and feelings of other people from the stigma into your diagnosis and going on with the rest of your life that way. Like it's just much better stress wise to think about it like that. Like, oh shit, well, we're here now. So let's go
yeah.
forward.
It's a manageable diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't dying as people. We aren't dying associated with herpes. It's a manageable diagnosis. And again, there's a spectrum in terms of whether someone is going to be symptomatic or asymptomatic, and whether they're going to have outbreaks or not have outbreaks or viral shedding. All of those things, it doesn't look the same for each person.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah. And then I always tell people, just I think that herpes is one of those things that kind of tells you what's going on with your body. Like it's a physical sign
yes,
of, all right, you've got a lot of stressful things going on. Let's start eliminating some of that. You've got a lot of bad people in your life. Let's start getting rid of that. You're
and
eating a
diet,
lot of cheese.
exercise.
Stop eating cheese. And that's
No,
me.
no,
I
you
know,
love
I know.
cheese.
I love queso, but I've limited it a lot, and
Yeah.
I think that I just feel better overall. But herpes has made me more mindful of my health, and it's made me be more proactive in making sure that I get into the gym, that I'm cooking my own food more. Don't get me wrong, I still enjoy a box of rice, but like Chinese food is my
You're not letting go
favorite.
of Uncle Ben
Oh no, not yet, not yet. We'll get to a point where I got to cut back on the sodium, which I've already been proactive about.
Yeah.
So we'll cross those bridges when we get to them. So, sex positive families. So we just talked a
Yes.
lot about. Well, we talked about consent. We talked about having the talk. Um, oh, how are our parents? Well, wait. Are you educating the parents on having the conversation with their children?
Yes, so that is the heart of the work, is helping parents to feel confident and competent around having sexual health discussions. And I use the term sexual health, not sex, because sexual health is an umbrella and it's more than sex. And it's before you talk about sex. It's about building a self-worth in children. It's about having open dialogues and shaking shame and addressing the realm and the spectrum of their sexual health, which is a lifetime. It's a journey, and it starts with in infancy. When you're building those bonds and attachment, those things lay the foundation for what will come in their sexual health journey. So yes, definitely, and I want to share that last night. So I have three children. I have a 4-year old and an 8-year old, and an 18. She'll be 19 in 1 month from today. And so with my 19-year old, she's visiting in from college with her boyfriend, and the three of us had some really wonderful discussions last night, because again, as 19, and he's about to be 20-year olds, they're certainly in that time of being sexually active or sexually connected and intimate, and so they're making those choices and those decisions that work for them. And so it's important that we have these discussions. And so I let them know that I'd be doing this podcast the next day, and so it was really great to be able to openly talk with them about these diagnoses, and again, talking about how can we reduce risk and have safer sex, and what types of conversations are they having about their their selves and their relationship and their goals and their values, and how much of that are they processing as individuals and then
Yes.
sharing and expanding out with each other.
Hmm.
And it was really beautiful, and I think that the more that we get comfortable and clear about who we are as individuals and our own sexual health journeys as parents and caring adults, the better we're able then to be of influence to the young people in our lives. And it's not something that you want to do when they get to being sexually active. You want to start these conversations and dialogues early. So very early, we're talking about body autonomy, giving them the accurate words so that they're naming their parts. It's not, the wee wee or the cooter, you know,
Yep.
these their actual body parts. We talk to them about safety and, again, good safe touch, unsafe touch, and boundaries. And there are all these things, again, that come before you're talking about penises and vaginas,
Hmm.
enjoying each other, or, butts and, all of that
Yeah.
stuff. So,
Yeah. My girlfriend's nephew, like I heard them say vagina in front of him, and I like, are you crazy? And they were like, no, he needs to know these things because,
yeah,
what if he's touched and,
yes,
like I think that the conversation went along the lines of if a therapist is asking, okay, well, where did he touch you? And then they're talking about cookies. He needs to be saying penis, vagina, not
yeah,
cookies and hot dog.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's. I mean, as early as, and he was 7 when I heard this. So it's like, what you're saying is we need to be planting these seeds through the
yes,
opportunities that come up. So when kids start to grab in their junk and they're like, oh, this feels good at whatever age that is, you'd be like, hey, okay, well, this is masturbation. You are experiencing dot, dot,
yeah,
dot, and be able to have those talks and not avoid it, because then I think that that's where the shame starts. It's,
absolutely,
oh, I touched myself. My mom yelled at me.
yep,
This is a bad thing. This is a bad
yep,
thing. And then you just carry that on where that bad seed was planted, not a positive good seed, where it's like, oh, you're coming into, these are the options that you are going to have now.
right,
And this decision, like, you have to do, like you said, what's best for you, even though, at childhood, I think we should be more responsible in guiding them through the decisions that they make that early, right?
Yeah, we want, really ideally, we want our young people to love and embrace themselves, and that includes their own bodies.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want them to feel resistance or shame or disgust in terms of their own bodies, because unfortunately a lot of us are adult children, right? We're adult children walking around with a lot of internalized messages and harmful messages and shame, and also trauma that we've experienced along our journeys, and some of us are, haven't really healed from those things, and it's healing is a lifelong process.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can just realize and see that we are in a position of influence, we can change the story and the narrative for another person, a young person's life,
Yeah.
and help prepare them. So to me, there's a big difference between preventing and preparing. And so a lot of what I
Oh
talk about
shit!
isn't about prevention.
I think
I'm
we
not
got the
trying to
title of this
prevent.
episode.
What's that?
That's gonna be the title of this episode.
Oh, love it. Yes, I love it. Because it's a lot of the sex education that we will get in schools and stuff. A lot of us remember, those pictures of the herpes sores and, syphilis and gonorrhea and all these things that are about prevention. Don't get pregnant. Don't get an STI. Those are the things that were the focus, and that is not at all the whole story or where we really want to focus them. We want to prepare our young people to be sexually healthy and have sexually healthy lifestyles, because as adults we know that we a lot of what we get and enjoy out of life has to do with human connection, and also us fulfilling, our own purposes and highest, selves and lives, and our self-esteem, our self-worth is the hugest component of that. And so we need to help prepare them to be really confident, be really fierce young people and emerging adults. And it starts early. It
Mm-hmm.
starts early. We have to give them the words, the language, the life skills. How do they negotiate safer situations with other people? How do they say no? How can they know what they want? How can they listen to their gut? What is their gut? What does that feel like?
Mm-hmm. And as
Yes.
I have more of these conversations, I realize something that has not come up, and that's more so being on the other side of it, being a man and hearing more about consent, sexual assault, and recognizing, oh shit, I can't remember the last time I verbally asked for consent to have sex. So,
Yeah.
how do we teach our young people, our young, our children in general, what does no look like, or what is
Right.
consent? Like, we're talking about giving consent, but we're not talking about receiving consent. If I haven't
Exactly.
received consent, or if I haven't received no consent, is that a yes? Because that's how I've taken it in my mind. It's like, well, okay, she didn't say no, so
Yes.
this is a go. When in reality, the reason behind her not saying no could be that I'm a massive dude and I would overpower her, and she
Yeah,
would
there's
just
a power
she's
dynamic for
she's
sure.
scared. She's scared to say no. So how do we educate our youth to go into it learning? Okay, hey, how about you give me consent here?
Exactly. So this is huge. And a lot of us didn't get this when we were younger, and a lot of us now, as parents, even don't realize that we're missing the mark. So, before your child even gets to the position of intimate relationships, what we need to do in early childhood is when, for example, my 4-year-old and my 8-year-old, when their sibling dynamics, of course, are always fun. And so when one of them communicates no or stop, you have a rule in your house. There's no pretty pleases, there's no, oh, come on, or any of that stuff. And even as parents, as the adults, we have to respect our child's voice and our child's autonomy, and not put them in the position to compromise their no. And so that's what happens a lot, because a lot of our current prior generations were raised to in household dynamics where I'm the parent, you're the child. The parent knows what's best for the child. So again, we were
Mm.
brought up in power dynamics that really don't serve us and don't allow for human rights.
Because this transfers into politics, it transfers into your
Mm-hmm.
career, it transfers
Hierarchies,
into relationships.
bureaucracy, right? So I have to respect you because you are an adult. And we see that that is not accurate or helpful messaging. That's harmful because not all adults are safe adults. Not all people. There's more that we need to teach our children and foster in them the ability to have a critical lens. We need to help them see what are the features of a safe adult? What are the features and characteristics of someone that you can trust? What are the features of respect? What does it feel like to be respected? And they learn that from us. We're those first and primary relationships, whoever the caring adults are in their lives. If we're not showing them respect, then they come to question their worth and their value and their ability to communicate their yeses and their nos. So that is something that we reinforce in our young people in our house very early and frequently.
Hmm.
So as soon as we hear them, kind of if they're getting into a tiff or anything, and if it's coming down to someone having said no or stop and they're not, tickling, for example, that's a common thing that a lot of us grew up experiencing and that's a real learning opportunity. I prefer not to engage my children in tickling because I think that it can cross those lines of consent really quickly, and the person that's being tickled is not often in a position to really give active consent, and because they're in a vulnerable position, right? They're in that
Yeah.
place where it's, oh gosh, this is so fun, or it feels funny. Oh wait, no, now it's uncomfortable. Oh wait, no, stop, and then the person you're laughing, and so that's a good example of how nonverbal cues,
That's a perfect
right?
example.
Right? So, but they're laughing. They're having a great time. I want them to keep having a great time. But no, no, oh God,
Yeah.
stop. Right? So that right there is something that a lot of young people do experience, and they're well-meaning folks on the other end, often adults or older, siblings or same age, whatever, that just want to they just want to do something fun. But it really is kind of a something that can be dangerous and can send the wrong messages about consent early.
Hmm.
So again, there are things like that, and just being able to give your child choices and options, and being respectful of what those end up looking like, and that can be down to what they want to do as an activity. And another big one that's coming about a lot lately is when we talk about affection with other adults, not forcing your children to hug or kiss other people,
Yes.
anyone really, even you as the parent, being mindful of when am I making assumptions about uh, the level of affection that my young person wants to have with me in this moment.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to power dynamics because
Yep,
if a kid says, "No, I don't want to kiss Uncle Johnny," on an intuitive level, they know something that we don't. But because of the power dynamic that we've
exactly,
grown up, because that's your uncle and I'm your parent, you don't tell us, "No, you don't want to do
exactly.
anything. You're going to go kiss your Uncle Johnny."
We've got to move away from that because the message you're sending to your child in that moment is that their body is not theirs. That their body is
Oh,
to be
shit.
used. Yeah, their body is to be used to please other people. Because if
Mm.
Uncle Johnny gets upset, I don't want Uncle Johnny to get upset. So
So
that's why I
now I
must
have to
kiss him.
use my body. And that, I
Exactly.
mean, on a deeper level, like, I think that that's where a lot of uh, child sexual assault cases
Mm-hmm.
take place as well, molestations and
Absolutely.
everything. And the kids just don't tell because of that fear, that power dynamic. So
Yes.
this can
Yeah,
get.
what we know of sexual abuse is that the perpetrators are most often people that the children know. They are not the person in the van, with the
With the
puppy
candy.
and the lollipops and that are snatching folks. we do hear, those are the stories we hear about that get sensationalized in the media. We don't hear about Uncle Johnny and little Petey, and their family dynamic. There
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of cases of incest and a lot of cases of inappropriate touch. There are also a lot of cases of touch that's happening, of non consensual touch and sexual abuse that's happening between young people. So you have maybe a 14-year-old child and a 5-year-old child, and that 14-year-old child is imposing, their power and, inappropriately touching a younger child.
Mm-hmm.
Those things, again, are not, we don't hear news stories about that, right? That's not the thing that gets broadcast. Often those are the things that, when they are discovered, parents, caring adults, often do not report them. They kind of push them under the rug. They try to minimize them. And so, again, there's healing that never takes place, and the messaging gets really convoluted then for the people that are involved in that situation, in terms of their worth, their value, their body autonomy, their sexual selves. Um, it's it's real deep. It's really complex, and a lot of us are walking around with these histories and without the outlets to be able to really process them. Life doesn't have a pause button,
No.
so that we can figure this all out. So that's where sex positive families, I really strive to bring forward these conversations and to bring things out of taboo. We have to talk about these things that we aren't talking about,
Mm-hmm.
so that we can collectively strategize, lend voices to, allow people to be heard, allow their stories to have value and worth, and
Yes. Yes.
for people to see them for what they truly are, so we can create some new stories.
Mm-hmm. And so this isn't about spreading awareness by any means. It's about inspiring action. We don't want people
Absolutely.
to start talking about better sex conversations with their children. We want people to start executing
Yes.
these conversations and getting their children to a place where they're able to understand and communicate about their sexual health without fear of shame or fear in general.
Yes. Absolutely. It's none of this is going to change if we're just talking about it. We have to actually do the work and confront those things that might feel awkward or might
Mm-hmm.
feel uncomfortable or might feel foreign. It's not about doing things perfectly. It's not about hitting the mark all the time. If you're willing and open to at least listen and ask the questions and engage in the dialogues, that is a huge start.
Yeah.
The rest of it is semantics, and I, I work hard to put a lot of information and resources out there. So, and books are huge. Books are great ways to engage our children. There's so many wonderful books out there that have been written and are being written that help parents and their children sit down together and learn these things together
Yeah.
with pictures and now videos. We have amaze.org, for example, which is creating these really fun and creative videos, short videos that help us have these conversations. So really there's no excuse, and what is getting in our way often is really just ourselves and our own sexual health journeys that we've had and some things that we haven't dealt with or processed. So we got
Mm-hmm.
to give space for that too.
Yeah. So we need to deal with that ourselves. We need to deal with our own before we can begin to, help others or deal with others' issues. I like that.
Right.
I like that. So we're approaching the end of everything that I had for you, all of the questions that I
Awesome.
had. This ended up being a very, very important episode. Like I
Yay.
said, normally I just interview people with STDs. We talk about their experience and what's it like dating and everything. But I'm finding that there's more of a need for this as well, because bringing awareness to the fact that there are so many people living in the world with STIs, with herpes, with HIV. And oh, by the way, it's manageable, it's treatable, and just because you were just diagnosed, it's fine. This is a tool to connect people with the resources that are available to them that they may not have otherwise known about, in addition to evolving into something that is, in fact, inspiring action, inspiring people to, well, does your 19-year-old at least know about your HSV too?
Oh yes, yeah. We,
Okay.
we again we talked about that last night, and it was part of the conversation. And knowing that I was going to come onto the podcast and be speaking very openly, and yes, I think again we talk about disclosure. I did a video actually that folks can check out about talking to your family about your diagnoses, whatever that, whichever diagnosis that may be.
Yes.
And there are reasons why people may choose to disclose, and there are reasons why not. And I kind of go into what are some things to consider if when you do choose to disclose,
Hmm.
how you can do that and why that could be of benefit. So yes, I believe fully that I want to show up authentically in my relationships, and that absolutely 100% includes my children.
Yeah.
I want to be my most authentic self because I am a model for them. If I'm not living my fullest, most honest life, then how do I give them permission for them to do that for themselves?
Yeah, and we'll link to that video where you can have that conversation with your
Awesome.
kids about your diagnosis. I want to link that into the episode description. So please send that to me
I
when we
sure
get
will.
off here. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with, or anything else that you want to share from like a tagline or something from Sex Positive Families?
Well, we are all about shaking the shame and trashing taboos around sexual health. And we want you to be confident. We want you to be competent. And I say that I'm speaking to parents and caring adults because we all have young people in our sphere, whether it's family members, whether it's young people we're teaching, whether it's friends, people we babysit, whatever that looks like. And so we are in a position of influence.
Yeah.
And so we need to know our influence, step into that influence, get informed, and feel empowered to be able to influence better outcomes for our young people.
Yeah, so we want to use our influence to raise and encourage influencers, not
Absolutely.
influencees. Is that even a
Yes.
word?
Which word?
Influencees?
Ooh, I don't see why not. Makes
I
sense to
well,
me.
well, hopefully it just makes sense. I'm not gonna edit that out if it's wrong, so you got to deal with it. All right,
We
so
want our young people to have great sex lives,
there you
period.
go. And that's just so like foreign as a parent. Like I don't want my infant daughter because that's how you see her. Like you, even if she's 28 years old, has 3 kids, like you see that baby that you held, and you're like, no, no way she's having sex. She adopted those children, or
Exactly. No way is my infant having sex. You're right. No way is your infant having sex. Your infant will grow.
yeah,
Trust me. 19 years later with my young person, wow, it goes by so fast. And so while you have them, as they develop, do the best and greatest, most under recognized, work in our society. The best work that you can do is being a positive influence to a young person, to
yep.
your child. And sex positive parenting is certainly one way to do that and approach sexual health for your young people.
All right. Now, that's a good place to leave off. This concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People featuring Melissa from Sex Positive Families podcast. How can we find you on social media?
Ooh, I love being on social media. So sexpositivefamilies.com is my website. It has a wealth of resources. I have blogs. You can connect to the podcast through there. As far as in all the social media platforms, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and LinkedIn. And so all of those links are available through the website. The podcast is on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Android, and or direct from the website. And we're having some real great conversations with a lot of diverse perspectives. Every week I drop a new episode.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, I can be found on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, and Reddit at H on my chest, the letter HONMYCHEST. Follow us on any of those social media sites. On Facebook, it's just me. I'm just Courtney Brame, and I have a logo of, or the podcast logo, Something Positive for Positive People, as my cover photo. I'm looking to the side in like the most epic black and white photo you could ever imagine. If you like or don't like any of these episodes and you haven't already, please leave us a review. Those reviews help tremendously in terms of allowing the podcast hosting sites to advertise our podcast to other people. The more they see people are interacting with the show, they want engagement, we need engagement. So just engage with the show. I understand anonymity is important to a lot of our listeners and not wanting to be associated with the show just because, we're afraid that maybe someone may think or find out that we have an STD just by association. Believe me, a lot of people listen to this podcast who do not know that they have an STD. So you're fine. And I completely understand if you want to stay anonymous, but you can still leave us a review as your token of appreciation if you found this episode or any other episode helpful. Till next time, stay positive.